A huge moment for the EU this weekend, Nuala. 60 years since that date when the Treaty of Rome was signed in 1957. But before those commemorations, there's another event taking place right now in the Vatican, just behind me. Those 27 leaders who have come here are in a private audience with the Pope. I think we can have a look inside the Apostolic Palace. It's one of its most splendid rooms. It's the Sala Regia, the regal room. It's where the Pope receives his most important VIPs. Magnificent hall covered in Renaissance frescoes. But figuratively speaking, there is an empty chair, that of the British Prime Minister, Theresa May. All the leaders are there, but Theresa May has decided that following the Brexit vote, it wouldn't be appropriate for her to attend this event this weekend in Rome. But here's what the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, had to say about that absence.
Will be sad, as I was sad when the vote, the referendum took place in Britain. For me, it is a tragedy. To be such a long, intense, interrelated history between the continent and Britain that I don't have an explanation for that, although I have particular and personal.
But does it feel like a failure, President Juncker?
It's a failure and a tragedy.
Well, let's go over to the United States and talk to Mark Blythe, who is Professor of Political Economy at Brown University, Rhode Island. Mark Blythe, thank you very much for speaking to us. Now, you predicted Brexit, you predicted the election of Donald Trump. What do you predict for the EU?
Well, it's great that it's made it to 60, and I hope that it makes it to 70, but it might not make it with the French election coming up. If the long odds are there, might not make it to 61. If it makes it to 61 and then you have the Italian elections coming up and you have the idea of putting the euro up for a referendum, that could also be a big problem. Sadly, the EU is a much more fragile political project than we like to think.
Right, so you're even talking in terms of months.
Think about it this way. The minute you put up the euro, and that's the real underlying problem, not the EU. The EU has been a fantastic political success. But when you put a monetary zone on top of that and you don't have corresponding fiscal institutions to share the burden, you end up with the economic problems that have been plaguing them for a decade. People are fed up of this. Very high youth unemployment, very low growth, very high debt, and they don't see a way out of it, hence all the populist reactions which are going on around Europe. These are long-term structural problems, and they're not going to go away anytime soon.
I'm wondering what you think that the European Union should do, what those 27 leaders should be talking about when they get together this weekend.
The one thing that they really need to do is remember that above all, Europe is an idea. It's an ideal. It's something worth striving for. In this moment in which we're all being encouraged to retreat back to the nation state and enjoy the benefits of being one nationality over another, the European Union is a fantastic polyglot that successfully integrates all these different economies and successfully integrates these different polities. Now, having one currency and no corresponding fiscal institutions, that's created a lot of tensions in there. But they have to learn once again that above all, Europe is political. It's something to sell to people rather than a technical project that they decide behind closed doors. That's part of the problem.
Right, that's what you think they should do. What do you think that they will do?
What they will do is kick the can down the road again and hope that they dodge a few more bullets electorally. But ultimately, the problem is that unless economic conditions really improve, relatively and absolutely, a populist party is going to come to power somewhere in Europe over the next few years, and they will have a referendum on the euro. And the minute you announce that, anyone with euros is going to start to think, well, what bits of paper am I going to be holding a few months from now? And then you could set off a runner through the banking system that's going to be hard for the ECB to stabilize. So this is much more fragile than we like to think. But it's not the problem with the EU itself. It's actually the euro which has been laid on top of it that creates the problems.
Mark Blythe, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed joining us. That's Mark Blythe, Professor of Political Economy at Brown University, Rhode Island. Now, the leaders are still inside the Apostolic Palace listening to that address by the Pope, and tomorrow's a very big day. They'll be in the original building where the Treaty of Rome was signed in 1957. Back to you in London.